Hi, I'm Stephen Poteet, and thank you for joining us for our Skin and Surgery podcast. This will be the second episode, and we're excited to have you join us for the ongoing conversation where we're talking about skin health and various surgery topics. I'm a board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon.
And I'm Tiffany Poteet. I'm a board-certified nurse practitioner, and we live and work in Worthington and Marysville, Ohio.
So last time we talked about this BBC article, the curious ways that your skin shapes your health, and we really emphasized that the skin can be an important factor in your overall health and wellness, and we introduced the concept of inflammaging, which again is fun to say. So today what we really want to talk about is more of the aging process in the skin and how that happens and what the effects are, and so we're going to go into that in more detail.
Yeah, so briefly, when we talk about the skin, so the skin has three layers that we're referring to. So the outermost layer, it's called the epidermis, and it has about the thickness of a sheet of paper. And then underneath the epidermis, and slightly thicker, is the dermis. And then we have the thicker, cushier hypodermis underneath that dermis.
Right, and so these layers each have important functions and do different things, but it is important to realize that, the skin has sort of different parts to it. And within all those layers are, some other interesting structures like hair follicles and sweat glands and pressure receptors and other things that are a lot of fun to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just like everything else in the world, our skin is constantly aging, except for Paul Rudd.
Or Chuck Norris.
Or Chuck Norris. We recently watched Only Murders in the Building, and Paul Rudd popped up, and I swear he does not age. I don't know what it is that he's doing. I tell you what he's doing. He's taking care of his inner health and preventing inflammation on his skin.
Well, we need to get him on the podcast.
To keep him. He's not dying in 20 years. Anyway, so certain encounters promote quicker skin aging. So first and foremost, we all should know by now UV radiation. And I've heard that UV radiation contributes upwards of 90% of aging of our skin.
Yeah, and so UVA radiation is obviously the radiation that comes from the sun, which we all know, can cause sunburns and skin damage and can lead to increased risk of skin cancer and things. But
and there's two different rays we're specifically talking about. So we're talking about UVA rays and UVB rays.
Right.
And UVA rays are thought to have a larger role in photoaging because they actually penetrate the dermis. So if you remember, that's the second layer below our epidermis. And that's where all of our collagen and elastin lies. And what does collagen and elastin do? Collagen provides the structure and strength of our skin. And just like the name implies, elastin provides the elasticity. So think of it as the recoil of the skin.
Right. And those molecules, when they get damaged or disrupted, result in a loss of skin laxity, which leads to more wrinkles and disorganized skin architecture. So it's, the UVB, UVA radiation is an important process of the photoaging phenomenon, which is something we all experience. But there are also other ways that our skin ages, things like dryness, oxidative stress, other environmental factors and things that come into contact with our skin.
Our diet, our sugar intake. So our sugar intake actually breaks down collagen and has this massive inflammatory effect on our skin and our body.
Right. So, and that's an important thing about the oxidants and things that come into our body, like the sugars and the toxins that we're always ingesting, create damage to our DNA, and they create these reactions. And antioxidants, which you hear a lot about, which occur naturally in fruits and vegetables, and people often take them for supplements, those actually combat or counteract that process of DNA damage. So it's important that we have those things in our skin as well.
So as we age, our skin loses the ability to retain moisture. We actually lose about 1% of collagen and elastin per year after, and I've heard varying numbers, and I'm sure it depends on the person, their genetics, but after age 30, I've heard after age 25. But one thing we do know, we lose collagen and elastin as we age, and our cell turnover slows down. And so whenever we're talking about cell turnover, we're talking about that top layer of skin, that epidermis. So the epidermis actually has 5 layers, and the cell turnover rate is the time it takes for a cell to move from the innermost layer to the outermost layer. So when we were kids and we would get a scratch on our face, we would heal the next day because our cell turnover, it was so quick. But as we age, our cell turnover actually slows down, and it takes even longer for us to heal, for the body to repair itself.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's really interesting. So actually having a higher cell turnover is good for skin health, I guess.
Yeah. So, and it leads not only to physical changes like uneven skin pigmentation and dullness, but like I mentioned earlier, it also increases the risk for chronic, non-healing wounds. So this is important to mention, the slower cell turnover, because a lot of interventions that we do are seeking to increase that cell turnover. So lead to a more even, skin tone, pigmentation, and really a healthier skin and skin barrier.
Right. Yeah, that's a really important component of skin health, and that's something we'll talk more in detail about, but we really begin there with a lot of our patients on who want to improve their skin health and improve how their skin looks.
So whenever we're talking about age, we're talking about chronological age. So that's the sun revolutions. That's your age in numbers. And then versus biological age. And biological age is how you're aging physically. So the maturity of your organs and cells.
So like chronologically, I'm 40-something, but biologically, I might be 25.
Yeah. And so there's different advanced ways to measure this. And we could get into that. Telomere shortening.
Tela who?
Oh, come on. Did I say it wrong?
No, I just, I think that.
If I said it wrong, correct me.
No, telomere.
Telomere. Telomere.
I've forgotten where those are. There's some part of the DNA, right?
And they're the caps at the end of your DNA. And they typically, it's widely accepted that they shorten with aging. I'm sure there's some debate about that. There's also the advanced method of measuring your biologic age by DNA methylation. So that happens when genes are turned off, and that typically increases with aging. Now, that's not as easy to put into clinical practice, your chronological versus biologic age. You can't just be like, hey, real quick, let's see how long your telomeres are. Or, hey, let's calculate your DNA methylation.
Yeah, that would be
difficult. Which is why it's, just easier to go with chronologic age whenever you're treating somebody.
Right. And the chronological age, is a good baseline. But I mean, like you're saying here, the biological age is important because if your health is better and that, you have some of these processes that aren't as far advanced as maybe your actual chronological age, or on the flip side, your biological age could be much older than your actual age in years, which is not where you want to be, I don't think.
Yeah, and it's cool, though, because it doesn't matter what age you are. You can always have an impact on your biologic age. So we can't have an impact on our chronological age, right? That's not going to change.
No, I can't change that.
But our biological age, it doesn't matter how late we start making changes. We see this actually affect our biologic age, which is encouraging because it's never too late.
Right.
To get younger.
Well, or even just to, shift your focus to, health and wanting to, start being healthy where you are. And so really, we don't want to try and make you look or feel, younger. We want to try and make you look and feel healthier in terms of your age and feel good about where you are. But I think this concept of chronological versus biological is an important one, and it definitely relates to the skin aging process, which we've been talking about.
So let's just discuss briefly how we can target skin aging head on and help limit the amount of inflammatory reactions our skin has. So obviously, starting out, broad spectrum sunscreen, SPF 30 or greater. So broad spectrum just means it's blocking against those UVA rays that we discussed earlier that tend to be the more harmful rays. But then you have your UVB rays that also contribute to sunburn. Those typically are affecting more your epidermis, so the top layer of your skin. So broad spectrum will cover both the UVA and UVB rays. And then 30 or greater is a fine number as long as you're applying it every 2 hours whenever you're in direct sunlight.
Right. And that's really tough when you have kids who are in the water and, always kind of moving around. But it is really important. The photoaging process is the majority of what causes aging in our skin. And so, the SPF protection is really key there.
Yeah, and I have to add that you want to make sure that you're also wearing sunscreen whenever you're driving, because those UVA rays do penetrate glass. So, it wasn't until a couple years ago that I started thinking about that and really paying attention to whenever I'm driving my sun exposure. And the majority of patients that I see in my practice, the left side of their face ages quicker than their right side of their face.
Oh, interesting.
And I am sure that there could be other reasons, but I think the majority of the reason is because of sun exposure.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
With driving.
Actually.
Yeah.
What about the topical antioxidants? What type of role can they play in the aging process?
Yeah, so we already talked about the oxidative stress and how that can contribute to skin aging. So vitamin C is a great topical antioxidant. It's one you'll want to use in the morning as opposed to the evening. Mm-hmm. I would recommend something else in the evening, which we can get to here in a minute. But vitamin C and combined with vitamin E actually has a synergistic effect, oxidative stress.
Right. So that helps to fight off this inflammatory process in the skin, which is, like we talked about already, causing the breakdown in some of those molecules like elastin and collagen. So vitamin C and E are kind of like part of the protective armor and therapies.
I love that concept of armor. So that's where I recommend my patients to put it on in the morning before they start their day. So another great active ingredient that I recommend for most patients to be on is a topical retinol. And you have varying degrees of concentration of retinol that you can use. So one that we sell at our practice, it's wrinkle and texture repair, and it's a 0.5% retinol. And then you also have the more potent tretinoin, which is retinol in its N form, in the acid form. And a lot of times patients can't tolerate that every night, but at least 3 to 4 times a week is what I recommend with tretinoin. And that's going to increase your cell turnover. That's going to help stimulate collagen in your dermal layer. Chemical pills are also great for increasing cell turnover, and some of our lasers.
Right. So we have a lot of different options. And these are things we really enjoy talking to patients about in the office, because certain things are better for certain patients than others. But definitely those topical antioxidants and the retinol, which comes from vitamin A, I believe. Mm-hmm. And those are kind of like the essential vitamins for the skin. And so we really like to get all the patients on those before we do some of these other more significant treatments like lasers or microneedling and some of the other treatments that can be so much more effective when you've kind of already prepared the skin for those treatments.
And it's important to note, so as we're talking about lasers and chemical pills, and we just mentioned inflammation, one might question, well, don't those lead to inflammation? And the answer is yes, but it's an acute event. So it's an acute, so short-lived, short-term, very controlled injury, and as opposed to more of that chronic inflammation from chronic UV exposure, chronic smoking, chronically poor diet.
Right, and it doesn't cause the same type of oxidative stress in the skin that things like that UV radiation does, because it just comes in and directly blows out and destroys your DNA. The lasers, it's a thermal, it's a heat, energy going into the skin. It creates a tiny burn, but that doesn't cause DNA damage or cellular damage. It just stimulates inflammation that helps rebuild new collagen and and kind of that brickwork in your skin.
And I like to look at it as a workout for your skin, right? So we work out. If you were to get our blood pressure or heart rate while we were at the peak of our workout, it would look like we're dying, right? Somebody would say, oh, they're acutely ill, but we know that it actually builds us stronger.
Just like these interventions we mentioned, the lasers, the chemical peels.
Right. Yeah, it's an acute injury, but it actually rebuilds our skin to a stronger state.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I like that. So there's a difference in chronic damaging inflammation and acute, kind of what you would say maybe therapeutic inflammation.
Acute and controlled. It's important that it's in a controlled environment, in a controlled form.
Absolutely, yeah.
So quickly, just to summarize some of the different things that we can do to tackle skin aging head on, obviously wearing sunscreen, vitamin C in the morning, a retinol or a tretinoin in the evening, and some of these aesthetic interventions that we do to help increase cell turnover and strengthen our skin barrier.
Yeah, I think that is a great summary of really what we want to try and offer in our practice. And of course, foods we eat and diet, nutrition plays a really important role in this too, and that's something that
I think we can get into that at another date.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to introduce the idea, but that's an important thing we like to talk about also. Well, great. I think this was a really good second episode. In conclusion, just wanted to summarize.
Speak for yourself.
By saying, our skin is always aging, but there are steps we can do to limit that aging process and promote healthier skin. And remember, that helps with overall health. And so that's really kind of what we're all about. And I hope you'll join us as we go into our next episode. The name of our practice is Ohio Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, and we have offices in Worthington, Ohio, and in Marysville, Ohio. You can find out more information about the services we offer and a little bit more about us and our practice at our website, which is www.ohioprs.com. Also, you can feel free to contact us anytime. The best email to do that is info@ohioprs.com. You can also find us online. Our Instagram handle is @OhioPRS, and you can also find us on Facebook.
And thanks to Maggio for providing the music and production for this podcast. A link to their information is provided in the description.